Arrogant mafia boss beaten ruthlessly by a boxer, disguised as a waitress. You think because you wear a suit and carry a gun, you know what a real fight looks like? Bella Rose's voice cut through the smoke-filled lounge like a blade through silk. Every conversation died. Every head turned. Even the jazz piano in the corner fell silent, the musician's hands frozen above the keys. Antonio Marcus, Kingpin, Predator, the man who made grown men weep, looked up from his whiskey with something like amusement dancing in his cold gray eyes. He was beautiful in the way a loaded gun was beautiful, all sharp lines and deadly promise. His tailored suit probably cost more than Bella made in 6 months. His rings caught the low light as he gestured lazily toward her. And what would a waitress know about fighting? His capos laughed on cue, a chorus of expensive suits and cheaper loyalty. Bella set down her tray with deliberate care. Her hands, scarred knuckles hidden beneath practiced grace, didn't shake. 3 years she'd been serving drinks to men in silk who'd never felt the sting of a callus. 3 years hiding the lightning in her fists, the violence she'd sworn to bury. But Antonio Marcus had made a mistake tonight. He'd grabbed her wrist when she'd refused his advances. He'd called her a whore in front of his men. He'd assumed that because she carried trays instead of guns, she was powerless. He was about to learn different. "Put me in the ring, Antonio." Bella's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Your best fighter. Your champion. And when I'm done breaking him, we'll talk about what my dignity is worth." Antonio leaned back in his booth, eyes narrowing with dangerous interest. Around them, the lounge held its breath. This was how legend started, with a woman in a waitress uniform challenging a monster on his own turf. "You want to fight?" Antonio's voice dropped to something soft and lethal. "Fine. You step into my ring against my heavyweight champion. When you lose, and you will lose, sweetheart, you belong to me for a week. My plaything. My entertainment. And when I win." "When?" Antonio laughed. "If. But sure, let's play pretend. If you win, I cancel your family's debt. All of it. Clean slate." Bella's heart stuttered. He knew about the debt. Of course he knew. Men like Antonio Marcus made it their business to know everyone's pressure points. "Deal," she said. What Antonio didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman serving their drinks used to be called the Rose of the Ring. Undefeated underground champion. The ghost who'd disappeared to protect her family from exactly the kind of violence Antonio peddled. But ghosts could come back. And when they did, they brought hell with them. Antonio raised his glass in mock salute. "Tomorrow night. My warehouse. Bring your courage, little waitress. You're going to need it." Bella turned and walked away, her spine straight, her hands steady. Behind her, she heard the men laughing. Betting on how long she'd last. Speculating about what Antonio would do to her after. Let them laugh. Let them bet. Tomorrow night, she'd remind them all why they should fear the Rose. Bella Rose had mastered the art of invisibility long before she ever learned to throw a punch. She moved through the Velvet Room, the city's most exclusive lounge and unofficial headquarters for every criminal enterprise worth mentioning, like she was part of the furniture. Tray balanced perfectly. Smile painted on. Eyes downcast in the universal language of service workers who knew better than to see too much. "Another round for table 7, she murmured to Marcus behind the bar. He was 60, gray-haired, and had been tending bar and mob establishments since before Bella was born. He knew every secret in this city and kept them all locked behind a patient smile. "You sure you know what you're doing, kid?" Marcus kept his voice low as he poured 4 fingers of 20-year scotch into crystal tumblers. Challenging Antonio Marcus? That's suicide. I know exactly what I'm doing. Bella loaded the glasses onto her tray, her movements practiced and efficient. I'm settling a debt. Your brother's debt, Marcus corrected. 25,000 in gambling losses. Not your responsibility. He's 19 and stupid. That makes it my responsibility. Bella's jaw tightened. Antonio said he'd forgive the whole thing if I win. And if you lose? Bella didn't answer. They both knew what happened to women who lost bets with Antonio Marcus. She carried the drinks to table 7, where 3 of Antonio's capos sat discussing territory disputes and protection rackets. They barely glanced at her as she set down their glasses. To them, she was scenery. Background noise. Not worth noticing. If only they'd looked closer. If they'd paid attention to the way she moved, balanced, centered, always aware of her surroundings. If they'd seen past the waitress uniform to the scarred knuckles she kept hidden with carefully applied makeup. If they'd noticed how her eyes tracked every exit, every potential weapon, every threat. But men like these never looked at women like her. Not really. They saw what they wanted to see, a pretty face, a soft target, someone to use and discard. Bella had built her invisibility on their blindness. She'd been the Rose of the Ring once. 5 years in the underground circuit, fighting in warehouses and abandoned factories, betting everything on her fists and her fury. 43 fights. 43 wins. No losses. No draws. Just blood and victory and the roar of crowds who came to watch the small girl with quick hands dismantle fighters twice her size. She'd been building a name. Building a fortune. Building a way out for her and her brother. Then their mother got sick. Cancer, fast and merciless. The medical bills piled up faster than Bella could earn money, even fighting twice a week. She needed one last fight, a big payday against a champion from the Russian circuit. But the Russians had connections. And those connections had made it clear, lose the fight, or lose your family. Bella had walked away instead. Disappeared from the circuit. Let the legend of the Rose die so her mother could live a few more months in peace. Her mother died anyway. And Bella's brother, grief-stricken and desperate to feel something other than pain, had found his way to Antonio's gambling tables. Which brought her here. Back to the violence she'd sworn to leave behind. Back to the ring. Back to being the Rose. Hey, sweetheart. A hand grabbed her wrist as she passed table 3. How about a smile? Bella looked down at the man, one of Antonio's enforcers, built like a brick wall with dead eyes and wandering hands. Her instinct was to break his fingers. To drive her palm into his nose. To show him exactly what happened to men who grabbed women without permission. Instead, she smiled. Patient. Submissive. Invisible. Of course, sir. He laughed and released her, already turning back to his conversation. Already dismissing her. 24 hours. That's all she had to maintain the disguise. 24 hours until she stepped into Antonio's ring and showed these bastards who she really was. Bella finished her shift at 2 a.m. She collected her tips, mostly singles and fives, though one generous regular had left a 20, and changed out of her uniform in the cramped staff bathroom. Her reflection stared back at her from the smudged mirror, brown hair pulled into a neat bun, minimal makeup, exhaustion painted in the shadows under her green eyes. She pulled off her concealer and let her real hands show. The knuckles were scarred and slightly crooked from breaks that hadn't healed quite right. The calluses were thick from years of hitting leather bags and human flesh. These were a fighter's hands. A survivor's hands. Tomorrow, Antonio Marcus would see these hands up close. And he'd learn that some ghosts bite back. Bella walked home through streets that smelled of garbage and broken dreams. Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned decades ago. But it was hers, and it was safe, and it kept her brother off the streets. Tommy was awake when she came in, sitting on their ratty couch with his head in his hands. At 19, he looked like a kid playing dress-up in trauma. Too young for the weight he carried. Too stupid to have avoided Antonio's tables. Bella. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I heard what you did. At the lounge. Challenging Antonio, are you insane? Probably. Bella dropped her bag and headed for the kitchen. But I'm also the only chance we have of getting out from under his thumb. You can't beat his champion. That's Viktor Kozlov. He's a monster. 6'5", 240, and he fights dirty. Bella smiled, pulling a beer from their ancient refrigerator. Good. So do I. Antonio's warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district, a hulking structure of rust and shadows where legal business came to die. Bella arrived at noon, as instructed, wearing jeans and a leather jacket that hid her fighter's build. 2 guards met her at the door, matching gorillas in expensive suits. They patted her down with professional efficiency, finding nothing but her ID and a $20 bill. She's clean, one of them grunted into his radio. Sending her in. The warehouse interior had been converted into a private boxing arena. A regulation ring dominated the center, surrounded by folding chairs and makeshift bleachers. Overhead lights cast harsh shadows, and the smell of sweat and blood lingered in the air like incense. Antonio waited in the ring, leaning against the ropes with calculated casualness. He'd traded his suit for workout clothes, black athletic pants and a fitted shirt that showed off the lean muscle beneath. His capos surrounded the ring like a pack of well-dressed wolves. The waitress arrives, Antonio called out, his voice carrying across the empty warehouse. I was starting to think you'd come to your senses. I'm here for the contract. Bella climbed through the ropes with practiced ease, her movements drawing appreciative murmurs from the watching men. Unless you're backing out? Backing out? Antonio's laugh was cold. Sweetheart, I'm about to own you. Why would I back out of that? He pulled a document from his pocket and handed it to her. Standard fight contract, liability waivers, medical disclaimers, the usual legal protection for underground matches. But the terms at the bottom made Bella's blood boil. Winner takes all. In the event of Bella Rose's defeat, she will serve as Antonio Marcus's personal companion for a period of 7 days, bound by all commands and requests. In the event of Viktor Kozlov's defeat, all outstanding debts owed by the Hughes family will be forgiven in full. Personal companion, Bella read aloud. That's a pretty way of saying property. I'm a wordsmith. Antonio's smile was sharp. Sign it or walk away. But if you walk away, your brother's debt comes due tomorrow. With interest. Bella pulled a pen from her jacket and signed without hesitation. The ink was barely dry before Antonio snatched the contract back, examining her signature like it was a winning lottery ticket. Excellent. He folded the paper and tucked it away. Fights tomorrow night. 8 p.m. I'll have 500 people here, all betting on how long you last. Current odds are 2 minutes before Viktor breaks something important. What about my end? Bella crossed her arms. I want my family's debt cancelled tonight. Before the fight. Antonio's eyebrows rose. That's not how this works, sweetheart. You fight first, then. No. Bella stepped closer, invading his space with deliberate intent. Up close, she could see the faint scars on his knuckles, the slight crook in his nose from an old break. He was a fighter too, once. Before he'd traded his fists for guns. You want me to risk my life in your ring? Fine. But I want insurance. Put it in writing that if anything happens to me, if I die, if I disappear, if I mysteriously get hit by a car, my brother's debt is void. Because I don't trust you, Antonio. I don't trust any of you. The warehouse went silent. Antonio's capos shifted uncomfortably, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Nobody spoke to their boss like this. Nobody challenged him in his own house. But Antonio just smiled. Slow and dangerous and genuinely intrigued. You've got balls, little waitress. I'll give you that. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dimitri? Draw up an addendum to the fight contract. Bella Rose gets insurance. If she dies or disappears before collecting her winnings, the Hughes debt is cancelled. Yes, I'm serious. Just do it. He hung up and studied Bella with newfound interest. You're smarter than you look. That's dangerous. So am I. Bella held his gaze. Tomorrow night, you'll see exactly how dangerous. I'm counting on it. Antonio circled her slowly, like a predator assessing prey. You know, I did some research after you left last night. Asked around about who you might be. Nobody knows a Bella Rose in the fighting world. Maybe I'm nobody. Or maybe you're somebody who disappeared. Antonio stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel his breath. Maybe you're a ghost. And maybe tomorrow night, I'm about to see what ghosts can do. Bella's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. Guess you'll find out. Guess I will. Antonio backed away, dismissing her with a wave. 8 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. And Bella? His smile turned cruel. Wear something pretty. I want my men to remember what you looked like before Victor ruins that face. Bella left the warehouse with her spine straight and her hands steady. But inside, her pulse raced with anticipation and fear. She'd signed a deal with the devil. Bet everything on fists that hadn't fought in 3 years. Gambled her freedom on the chance that muscle memory and rage would be enough. Tomorrow night, the rose would bloom again. And Antonio Marcus would learn that some flowers had thorns sharp enough to draw blood. Fight day arrived with gray skies and the smell of coming rain. Bella spent the morning running through her old training routine, shadow boxing in her cramped apartment, working the heavy bag she'd hung from the ceiling beam, drilling combinations until her knuckles bled through the tape. Tommy watched from the doorway, his face pale with worry. You don't have to do this, he said for the 100th time. I can work. I can pay off the debt. It'll just take time. We don't have time. Bella wiped sweat from her forehead. Antonio doesn't do payment plans, Tommy. He does examples. And I'm not letting you become one. But if you lose, I won't lose. Bella threw a final combination, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, each punch crisp and powerful. I'm the rose. I don't lose. The weigh-in was scheduled for 4 p.m. at the warehouse. Bella arrived wearing workout gear and her old fighting jacket, black leather with a faded rose embroidered on the back. She'd kept it hidden for 3 years, a relic from another life. Wearing it now felt like putting on armor. The warehouse was already filling up. Men in expensive suits mingled with street thugs and career criminals. Money changed hands as bookies called odds. The air crackled with anticipation and testosterone. Antonio waited by the ring, surrounded by his inner circle. He'd dressed for the occasion, tailored slacks and a silk shirt that probably cost more than Bella's rent. He looked like a king holding court, casual and confident in his power. Viktor Kozlov stood beside him. The champion was exactly as Tommy had described, 6'5", 240, built like a tank with fists the size of sledgehammers. His face was a roadmap of scar tissue, and his eyes were flat and empty. A killer's eyes. "Ah, our guest of honor." Antonio beckoned Bella forward. "Come, let's make this official." The scale sat ringside, ancient and probably inaccurate, but nobody cared about precise measurements in underground fights. This was theater. Spectacle. A chance for Antonio to show off his prize before Viktor destroyed it. Viktor stepped on first. The scale groaned under his weight, 238 pounds of muscle and malice. He stepped off without a word, his expression never changing. Bella's turn. She shed her jacket and stepped onto the scale in just her sports bra and fight shorts. Whistles and catcalls echoed through the warehouse. She ignored them, eyes fixed on the numbers. 128 pounds. A 110-pound difference, one of Antonio's capos called out. "This isn't a fight, it's murder." "Then she shouldn't have signed the contract," Antonio replied mildly. He circled Bella, examining her like merchandise. "You're smaller than I expected. Leaner. Almost delicate. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Absolutely sure." Bella met his gaze without flinching. "Last chance to back out, little waitress. I'll even be generous, work off the debt in my clubs. 6 months of serving drinks, and we call it even." "I didn't come here to serve drinks." Bella stepped off the scale and faced Viktor directly. The Russian champion stared down at her with all the expression of a concrete wall. "I came here to fight." "Your funeral," Viktor said. His English was heavily accented but clear. "I break you quick. Make it less painful." "How considerate." Bella smiled. "I'll try to return the favor." The crowd laughed. Even Antonio's lips twitched with amusement. This was exactly the show they'd paid for, the lamb pretending to be brave before the slaughter. But then Bella did something unexpected. She stepped into Viktor's space, close enough to smell the testosterone and arrogance rolling off him in waves. She looked up at his scarred face and let her smile turn cold. "Sharp. Dangerous. You fought 47 times, she said quietly, just loud enough for Viktor and Antonio to hear. 42 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws. Your last loss was to a Brazilian kickboxer in Sao Paulo. He broke your ribs because you drop your left hand when you throw the right hook. And your 2 draws? Both against fighters who worked your body until you couldn't breathe. You're strong, Viktor. You're fast for your size. But you're predictable. And that's going to cost you everything." Viktor's expression finally changed, surprise flickering across his flat eyes. Antonio's smile vanished entirely. "Who the hell are you?" Antonio asked. Bella pulled on her jacket, the rose on the back catching the overhead lights. When she turned back to them, she was someone else entirely. Not the waitress. Not the victim. But the ghost they'd heard whispers about. The legend that walked away undefeated. "I'm the woman who's about to embarrass you in front of 500 people, Bella said. See you tonight, Antonio. Try not to bet against me. You'll lose everything." She walked away through the stunned silence, leaving Antonio and Viktor staring after her. For the first time since issuing his challenge, Antonio Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. The warehouse transformed as night fell. Folding chairs filled with spectators, mobsters and businessmen, thugs and thrill-seekers, all drawn by the promise of violence. Overhead lights blazed down on the ring, turning it into an island of harsh white in a sea of shadows. The air reeked of cigar smoke, expensive cologne, and bloodlust. Bella arrived at 7:45 p.m. through the back entrance, her gym bag slung over one shoulder. She'd come alone, no corner, no trainer, no supporters. Just her and the violence she'd been suppressing for 3 years. The locker room was a converted storage space with cracked mirrors and a single wooden bench. Bella changed methodically, each movement part of a ritual she'd performed hundreds of times. Sports bra. Fight shorts. Hand wraps, white tape wound around her knuckles in a pattern she could execute blindfolded. Her hands moved on muscle memory, wrapping and tucking and securing. When she finished, she studied her reflection. The woman staring back was someone she'd thought dead and buried. The Rose. Undefeated. Unforgiven. Ready to remind the world why they should fear her name. A knock on the door made her turn. Antonio pushed inside without waiting for permission, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Final chance to walk away, he said, though his tone suggested he no longer believed she would. Victor is warming up, and he's angry about what you said earlier. He's going to hurt you, Bella. Badly. Good. Bella rolled her shoulders, feeling muscles wake and stretch. I fight better when my opponent is emotional. Makes them sloppy. Antonio studied her with something approaching respect. You're not who you pretended to be. The scared little waitress, that was an act, wasn't it? We all wear masks, Antonio. You should know that better than anyone. Who are you really? Bella smiled. Watch the fight. You'll figure it out. The crowd's roar shook the walls as 8 p.m. approached. Bella could hear the announcer warming them up, building anticipation, taking final bets. The odds were heavily in Victor's favor, 100-1 against the waitress. A few brave souls had bet on her anyway, drawn by either stupidity or intuition. Introducing first, the challenger. The announcer's voice boomed through the warehouse. Standing 5'4", weighing 128, making her professional debut. Bella Rose. Bella walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Men whistled and jeered. Someone threw a drink that splashed against the floor near her feet. She ignored it all, her eyes fixed on the ring, her mind narrowing to a single point of focus. Victor waited in the opposite corner, bouncing on his toes, his massive hands wrapped in red tape. He looked like a monster from mythology, huge, scarred, unstoppable. But Bella had fought monsters before. And she'd always walked away victorious. She climbed through the ropes and claimed her corner. No stool. No water. No team. Just her and the fight ahead. And the champion, the announcer continued. 42 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws, the pride of St. Petersburg. Viktor Kozlov. The crowd exploded. This was their champion. Their monster. The man who defended Antonio's underground circuit for 2 years, destroying every challenger with brutal efficiency. The referee, a retired boxer with cauliflower ears and a permanent squint, called them to center ring. I want a clean fight, he said, though everyone knew there were no clean fights in Antonio's warehouse. Protect yourselves at all times. Touch gloves. Victor extended his massive fists. Bella tapped them lightly with her own. I am sorry for what I must do, Victor said quietly. Don't be, Bella replied. I'm not. The bell rang. Victor came out aggressive, throwing a jab-cross combination designed to test Bella's reflexes. She slipped both punches easily, moving her head just enough to let his fists pass harmlessly by. The crowd gasped. Those weren't the movements of an amateur. Those were the movements of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Victor tried again, a heavy hook aimed at Bella's body. She pivoted away, letting his momentum carry him past, then snapped a quick jab into his ribs. Not hard enough to hurt him, but hard enough to send a message. I can touch you whenever I want. The fight that followed was less a battle than a masterclass. Bella moved like water, flowing around Victor's power, slipping his punches by millimeters, making him hit air while she found flesh. Jab to the ribs. Cross to the solar plexus. Hook to the liver that made Victor grunt and stumble. The crowd fell silent, watching in disbelief as the tiny Waitress systematically dismantled their champion. At 2 minutes, Bella shifted strategies. She'd mapped Victor's timing, understood his patterns. Now came the finish. Victor threw his signature right hook, powerful, devastating, and exactly as predictable as Bella had said. His left hand dropped 6 inches, protecting nothing but air. Bella stepped inside his guard and threw an uppercut that started at her hips and carried every ounce of her body weight. Her fist connected with Victor's chin with a sound like a bat hitting a baseball. His head snapped back. His eyes went glassy. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The referee didn't bother to count. Victor was unconscious before he hit the canvas. 3 minutes. That's all it took. 3 minutes for Bella Rose to prove she was exactly who she'd claimed to be. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Half the crowd screamed in outrage, having just lost fortunes on bad bets. The other half cheered in wild disbelief. Money changed hands in frantic bursts as bookies tried to calculate the damage. And Antonio Marcus, standing ringside with his mouth slightly open, realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The Rose hadn't died. She'd just been sleeping. Antonio climbed through the ropes before the crowd could fully process what they'd witnessed. His expression was carved from stone, his jaw set in a hard line. Around the warehouse, his capos watched with barely concealed shock. Their boss had been humiliated. His champion, his unbeatable monster, lay unconscious in the center of the ring. And the Waitress stood over Victor's body, barely breathing hard, her hands still raised in a perfect fighter's stance. "That's not possible," Antonio said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Nobody moves like that. Nobody times punches that perfectly. Who the hell are you?" Bella lowered her hands slowly, her green eyes locked on his. "I told you. I'm the woman who's about to take everything you thought you knew and burn it to the ground. You cheated." Antonio's hands clenched into fists. "You drugged him. You." "I beat him." Bella's voice cut through his denial like a knife. "Fair and square, in front of 500 witnesses. And now you're going to honor our contract. My family's debt is forgiven. That's what we agreed. The agreement was that you'd fight Victor." Antonio stalked closer, his presence filling the ring with barely restrained violence. "It didn't say anything about you being a professional fighter. You lied about who you were." "No, I didn't. You assumed I was weak because I served drinks. You assumed I was helpless because I'm a woman. You made assumptions, Antonio, and they cost you everything." Bella tilted her head, studying him with clinical interest. "Now you're embarrassed. Your men are wondering if their boss is losing his edge. And you're looking for a way to save face. Careful, little Rose." Antonio's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You may have beaten Victor, but you're still standing in my house. Surrounded by my men. One word from me, and you disappear." The crowd pressed closer, sensing the shift in power. This wasn't just about a fight anymore. This was about respect, control, and the hierarchy that governed their world. Bella should have been afraid. Should have backed down. Should have taken her victory and walked away. Instead, she smiled. You want to save face, Antonio? You want your men to stop wondering if you're weak? She spread her arms wide, inviting catastrophe. Then stop hiding behind your champion. Stop hiding behind your guns and your threats. Get in this ring and fight me yourself. The warehouse went silent. Even the whispers died away, leaving only the hum of overhead lights and the sound of Victor's labored breathing as medics finally reached him. Antonio stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want me to fight you? I want you to prove you're not all talk. Bella's smile turned sharp. You've spent years building your reputation on fear and violence. So show me. Show everyone. Prove you're not just a trust fund kid playing gangster in his daddy's warehouse. Antonio's face flushed with rage. Around the ring, his capos shifted nervously, hands drifting toward weapons. But then something flickered in Antonio's eyes, something that looked almost like respect mixed with fury. Fine, he said quietly. You want a fight? I'll give you a fight. But when I put you down, and I will put you down, you're mine for 2 weeks instead of 1. Double or nothing. Deal. Bella's heartbeat kicked into overdrive, but her voice remained steady. And when I win, you don't just forgive my family's debt. You leave my brother alone forever. No more gambling tables. No more temptation. He's off limits to your entire organization. Ambitious. Antonio shrugged out of his silk shirt, revealing a fighter's physique, lean muscle over a frame built for speed and violence. His torso was a canvas of scars and tattoos, each one telling a story of survival. But sure. Let's make this interesting. He pulled on fight gloves while his men scrambled to clear Victor from the ring. The betting started immediately, odds shifting wildly as money poured in. Some bet on Antonio out of loyalty. Others bet on Bella, having just watched her destroy Victor. The referee looked uncertain. Boss, are you sure about this? Shut up and ring the bell, Antonio snarled. The bell rang. Antonio came out fast and aggressive, nothing like Victor's calculated power. He threw combinations with technical precision, jab, jab, cross, hook, each punch designed to set up the next. He'd been trained, Bella realized. Really trained. Before the suits and the guns, Antonio Marcus had been a fighter. But Bella had been a champion. She slipped his first combination with minimal movement, reading his rhythm, timing his breathing. Antonio was good. Maybe even great by normal standards. But he telegraphed his power punches, dropped his shoulder before throwing the right cross, and kept his chin too high. Amateur mistakes disguised by natural talent. Bella countered with a quick jab that snapped Antonio's head back. His eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been pain. She followed with a body shot that drove the air from his lungs. You're fast, Antonio admitted, circling her carefully. I'll give you that. You're predictable, Bella replied. I'll give you that. Antonio lunged forward with a hook-uppercut combination that would have knocked out most opponents. But Bella wasn't most opponents. She rolled with the hook, let it slide past her ear, then stepped inside his guard while he was committed to the uppercut. This close, she could see the realization dawning in his eyes. Could see him understanding, finally, that he was outmatched. She drove an uppercut of her own into his solar plexus, the same punch that had dropped Victor. Antonio's body folded around her fist. His legs buckled. He staggered backward, gasping, his face pale with shock. Bella could have finished him there. Could have thrown the final punch that would have put him down on the canvas next to his champion. Instead, she stepped back, lowered her hands, offered him a choice. "Stay down," she said quietly. "Take the loss with dignity. Or get up and make me hurt you worse." Antonio's gray eyes met hers, and for a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Two fighters acknowledging each other's skill in the only language that mattered, violence. Then pride won over wisdom. Antonio surged forward with a roar, throwing everything he had into one final combination. Hooks, crosses, uppercuts, a desperate barrage of punches fueled by ego and rage. Bella moved like smoke, slipping each punch by millimeters, letting him burn through his energy. And when he overextended on a wild haymaker, she stepped inside and threw a perfect uppercut that connected with his chin. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Antonio's eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. He dropped to the canvas in a heap, joining his champion in unconsciousness. The crowd exploded. Some cheered. Some screamed in outrage. Money changed hands in a frenzy of settling bets. And Bella Rose, the ghost who'd disappeared 3 years ago, stood alone in the center of the ring, victorious over both the champion and the king. "The contract is fulfilled," she said to the referee. "I want it in writing. Tonight." Then she climbed out of the ring and walked away, leaving Antonio Marcus unconscious and humiliated in front of 500 witnesses. She'd come for her freedom. She'd earned it with blood and skill and the kind of violence that made legends. But as she reached the locker room, Bella couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just started something far more dangerous than a simple fight. Something that would change everything. Bella was wrapping her ribs, bruised from one of Antonio's body shots that had actually landed, when the first explosion rocked the warehouse. The blast wave shattered windows and knocked her off balance. Screams erupted from the main floor, followed by gunfire, sharp cracks that sent her fighter's instincts into overdrive. She grabbed her jacket and burst from the locker room into chaos. Bella spotted Antonio near the ring, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his shirt torn and soaked with crimson. He'd grabbed a gun from one of his fallen guards and was firing at the attackers, but he was pinned down, surrounded, outnumbered. Their eyes met across the chaos. In that moment, Bella had a choice: walk away and let Antonio's enemies finish what she'd started, or do something monumentally stupid. She chose stupid. Bella sprinted across the warehouse floor, ducking under gunfire, using overturned tables as cover. She grabbed a fallen pipe, solid steel, about 3 feet long, and came up behind one of the attackers. Her swing connected with his skull with a satisfying crack, and he dropped. "What the hell are you doing?" Antonio shouted as she dove behind his cover. "Saving your ass." Bella grabbed the fallen attacker's gun, a Glock 19, loaded and ready. "Who are these people?" "My second in command. Dimitri." Antonio fired 3 shots, dropping another attacker. "He thought my obsession with you made me weak. Called a vote. This is his answer. So this is my fault. This is my world, sweetheart. Welcome to it." Antonio's smile was savage despite the blood on his face. "Can you shoot? Point and pull, right? Good enough." They moved together, Antonio providing covering fire while Bella flanked, using her speed and the chaos to get close enough to use her newfound weapon. She wasn't a trained shooter, but at close range, even amateurs got lucky. She fired twice, both shots finding flesh, and 2 more attackers fell. "Back door." Antonio grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a service exit. "We need to get out before they pin us completely." They ran through smoke and gunfire, Antonio's remaining loyal guards forming a protective wedge around them. Men fell on both sides, friends and enemies becoming corpses in the span of heartbeats. They burst through the back exit into the cold night air just as a second explosion ripped through the warehouse. The blast waved through them forward, and Bella hit the pavement hard, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. Antonio landed beside her, groaning. Blood soaked his shoulder, a bullet wound, fresh and bleeding. He tried to push himself up and collapsed. "Can't run," he gasped. Bella looked back at the burning warehouse, then at Antonio. She should leave him. Should take this opportunity to disappear back into her invisible life. Instead, she grabbed him under the arms and hauled him toward a nearby alley. For a man who looked lean, he was solid muscle and dead weight. Her ribs screamed in protest, but she didn't stop until they were hidden in the shadows between buildings. "You're an idiot," Antonio managed through gritted teeth. "Should've left me." "Probably." Bella pressed her hand against his shoulder wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. "But you owe me a contract. Can't collect if you're dead." Antonio laughed, then coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Practical. I like that." Behind them, sirens wailed. The warehouse continued to burn, and Bella knew they had minutes at most before police swarmed the area. "We need to move," she said. "Do you have a safe house?" 3 miles, north. Red brick, warehouse. Antonio's eyes were starting to glaze. "Key under the dumpster." "Of course it is." Bella pulled him to his feet, draping his arm across her shoulders. "Come on, boss. Time to see if you're as tough as you pretend to be." They disappeared into the night, leaving behind the burning remains of Antonio's empire and the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The safe house was exactly as advertised, a converted warehouse in a forgotten industrial district, the kind of place where questions weren't asked and police rarely patrolled. Bella found the key, dragged Antonio inside, and locked the door behind them. The interior was sparse but functional, a kitchenette, a bathroom, a bed, and a table loaded with medical supplies. Antonio had planned for emergencies. Smart, if paranoid. "Sit," Bella ordered, pushing him onto a chair. She grabbed the first aid kit and spread it open on the table. "Shirt off." "Buy me dinner first," Antonio mumbled, but he complied, hissing in pain as the fabric pulled away from his wound. The bullet had gone through his shoulder, clean entry and exit wounds, which was the best they could hope for. But it was bleeding heavily, and Antonio's face had gone gray with blood loss. Bella worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She'd patched up fighters before, back in her underground days. Nothing fatal, but enough to know the basics. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts." Antonio's gray eyes found hers. "Why did you help me back there? You could have walked away." "I told you. You owe me a contract." "That's not why." Antonio caught her wrist as she reached for antiseptic. "Tell me the real reason." Bella was quiet for a long moment, threading a needle with surgical suture. "Because watching you fight, even just for those few minutes, you weren't the arrogant boss. You were just a man trying to survive. And I know what that's like. The rose of the ring." Antonio's voice was soft. "That's who you are. I figured it out during the fight. The footwork, the timing, the way you read opponents. You're the ghost everyone talks about. The undefeated champion who disappeared 3 years ago." "Was." Bella began stitching his wound, her movements precise and efficient. "I'm not her anymore." "You're exactly her. You just convinced yourself you weren't." Antonio gritted his teeth as the needle pierced his skin. "Why did you stop fighting?" Because men like you made it impossible to fight without blood following me home. Bella's voice was hard. The Russians wanted me to throw a fight. I refused. They threatened my family. So I walked away. And tonight you walked back. For your brother. For me. Antonio's hand found hers again, stilling her work. You're not invisible, Bella. You never were. You just wanted to be. Their faces were inches apart, and for the first time, Bella saw past the arrogance and violence to the man underneath. Someone as trapped by his world as she was by hers. We should have been enemies, she whispered. We still might be. Antonio's thumb traced her scarred knuckles. But right now, we're all each other has. Dimitri will be hunting both of us. He can't let us live after what happened tonight. So what do we do? Antonio's smile was sharp and dangerous. We hunt him first. They spent 3 days in the safe house, planning their revenge. Antonio made calls to his remaining loyal contacts, mapping Dimitri's movements and resources. Bella used her underground connections, fighters, bookies, and street-level operators who owed her favors from the old days. Dimitri's holdup in the old steel factory on the east side, Bella reported on the 3rd day, spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. He's got maybe 20 men, but they're scattered. Overconfident. They think we're dead or running. How did you get this information? Antonio looked impressed despite himself. I know people you don't. The ones you ignore because they're not rich or connected. Bella tapped the map. Street fighters, homeless veterans, sex workers. They see everything, Antonio. And they remember when people show them respect. Antonio studied the map, then studied her. You've been planning this kind of thing your whole life, haven't you? You're not just a fighter. You're a strategist. I had to be. In the underground circuit, you either think 3 steps ahead or you end up dead in an alley. Bella circled 3 positions on the map. We hit him at dawn. Low visibility. Most of his men will be tired or drunk. We go in fast, take out his communications, and corner him before he can call for backup. We? Antonio's eyebrow rose. You're coming with me. You're still recovering from a bullet wound. You need backup, and I'm the best you've got. Bella met his gaze steadily. Besides, Dimitri tried to kill me too. I've earned the right to look him in the eye when we end this. Antonio was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand, not with possession or arrogance, but with something that looked like partnership. Thank you, he said simply. For not letting me die. For staying when you could have run. For being unexpected. You're welcome. Bella squeezed his hand once, then pulled away. Now let's go remind Dimitri why people fear the name Antonio Marcus. Dawn broke cold and gray over the steel factory. Bella and Antonio approached from opposite sides, their timing synchronized by cheap burner phones. Antonio moved with the fluid grace of a predator despite his injured shoulder. Bella moved like smoke, silent, deadly, invisible until she chose to be seen. They took out the guards efficiently, using suppressed weapons and Bella's frighteningly effective hand-to-hand skills. By the time they reached Dimitri's inner sanctum, alarms were blaring, but it was too late. Dimitri sat behind a massive desk, surrounded by his final 4 bodyguards. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from shock to fury to something approaching respect. You're supposed to be dead, Dimitri said in heavily accented English. Disappointed? Antonio leveled his gun at his former second-in-command. You should have made sure, Dimitri. Sloppy work for someone planning a coup. You were weak. Dimitri stood, his face flushed with anger. Obsessed with a waitress. The men were laughing at you. Let them laugh. Antonio's voice was cold steel. I'm still standing. You're about to fall. That's the only math that matters. The gunfight was brief and brutal. Antonio's aim was lethal despite his injury. Bella moved like a dancer, disarming one guard with a spinning kick, dropping another with a punch combination that would have made her old fans weep with joy. When the smoke cleared, Dimitri's bodyguards were down. And the would-be king sat behind his desk, blood spreading across his expensive suit, his eyes going glassy. Should've, just, killed you, Dimitri gasped. Probably, Antonio agreed. But you underestimated us both. Fatal mistake. 2 weeks later, Bella stood on a beach she'd never seen before, watching the sun set over water that stretched to infinity. The sand was white, the air was warm, and for the first time in her adult life, she felt something close to peace. Beautiful, isn't it? Antonio's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in casual clothes, jeans and a simple shirt, no suits or silk or signs of the life he'd left behind. His shoulder was healing well, the stitches she'd given him leaving only a faint scar. I never thought I'd see the ocean, Bella admitted. Never thought I'd get out of the city. We're out now. Antonio joined her at the water's edge, his bare feet sinking into wet sand. Free. No empire. No debts. No one hunting us. After Dimitri's death, Antonio had done the unthinkable, he dismantled his own organization. Sold his territories to rivals, paid off his remaining soldiers, and scattered his fortune across untraceable offshore accounts. He'd chosen freedom over power. And Bella had hung up her gloves for good. No more underground fights. No more violence masquerading as survival. Just peace, quiet, and a second chance she'd never expected. Do you miss it? She asked. The power? The fear? Antonio was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I miss the certainty of it. Knowing my place in the world. Knowing what I was. He looked at her, his gray eyes soft in the fading light. But I don't miss the man I was. The one who thought women were possessions and violence was the only language worth speaking. You're still that man, Bella said, but her tone was gentle. You can't erase your past just by running from it. No. But I can choose who I become next. Antonio took her hand, his thumb tracing her scarred knuckles, a gesture that had become familiar over the past 2 weeks. With you, if you'll have me. As an equal. As a partner. Not as a boss and his fighter, but as two people trying to figure out who they are without the violence. Bella looked down at their joined hands, his scarred from holding guns, hers scarred from throwing punches. 2 weapons trying to become something softer. I don't know if I can do soft, she admitted. I've been fighting my whole life. Then we'll learn together. Antonio's smile was genuine, free of arrogance or calculation. No more rings. No more warehouses. Just us and whatever comes next. Bella squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own. They were damaged people, both of them. Broken by the same violence that had brought them together. But maybe that was okay. Maybe broken people could still find something whole in each other. Okay, she said. But if you ever grab my wrist without permission again, I'm breaking your fingers. Antonio laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded. Deal. They stood together on the beach as the sun sank below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Behind them was a city that thought they were dead. A world that would forget them in time. A life built on blood and fear and the kind of violence that left scars on your soul. Ahead was uncertainty. Freedom. A second chance neither of them deserved but both would fight to keep. Bella Rose, the undefeated champion who'd walked away once before, had finally found something worth staying for. And Antonio Marcus, the king who'd ruled through fear, had finally learned that power meant nothing compared to the woman standing beside him with lightning in her fists and fire in her heart. The fight was over. The bell had rung. And for the first time in both their lives, they'd won something more valuable than victory. They'd won freedom. The end.
Hope you enjoyed this story. Stay tuned for more interesting and captivating tales. Please like, subscribe and share.